Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's been a great 2 days of the conference, and I feel quite privileged to be a part of it, and to follow up a great panel on the on city initiatives. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about a development that started taking place about 10 years ago, roughly a little bit more than 10 years ago. It's a project called Park 2020. It's a development in the Netherlands. I'm not going to open up and talk to you about all the catastrophic damages that the industry of real estate development does on our planet. I think that that's not the way that I want to begin the talk. I'd rather actually just take us quickly back and see where we're at right now and see where the industry has evolved. I'm going to start there and then move into the project. So I really like this quote. It's been something that's been that I came across in a client that I was helping to work with. And when you think about it, it's absolutely true. The results that we see in our daily world and in our lives are all there perfectly by design. And so if we look at the design of our industry, it's actually quite a remarkable industry. I mean, the job of the real estate world is to build the world of tomorrow. And it's quite a dynamic and exciting request. And if you look about where we came from, traditionally it was something that was done very slowly, with purpose. Change wasn't happening so fast. Financing sometimes took place over years, maybe even a decade. I believe Notre Dame took many decades to finance as they built that. And I would say it's a structure that requires some work. It's catastrophic that's happened there. But these properties and structures from a little bit more of the older times were really something that were very, very deliberate. But what do we do today? And you see this trend really start taking place after the Industrial Revolution and more after the Second World War, was that we started really driving into this mass production industry. We don't talk about building property anymore, we talk about building square meters. This all accelerated in the 70s when real estate investment trusts and now property became a very, very interesting investment vehicle. We started really looking at these things in terms of the revenue that they can generate, and that's the world we live in today. However, if we look at how we build today, we still build for buildings that are 80, 90, 100 years, yet we're confronted with a world where dynamic change on a regular and consistent basis, faster than ever before, is the norm. So as we still continue to build in the behaviors of the past, while we're still confronted with a new set of challenges, you see that it's really not mixing up or not aligning. It's like driving 200 kilometers an hour in the fog, and no wonder we've made the mistakes that we've made in this. So when we came across the writings that Bill and Michael did many years ago, Cradle to Cradle, remaking the way we make things, it was almost like one of those aha moments. Like, why have we not been doing this in a while for a long, long time? So we set out to try and just say that it could be happening, and I have to really say that now I was working with the Delta Development Group at that time. Today I represent a different organization called JLL, but I'm going to talk to you about the projects that we did back then. And so what we ended up doing was we actually started saying, how can we just build some of this stuff? So we reached out to both Bill and Michael and just started relentlessly calling them until they would finally pick up our telephone calls and ask them for the help to do this. We put the money together, and we started building this park. And it's still going on today. It's nearing the end of its completion. The metrics of it, it's about 92,000 square meters, pardon me, of built environment. Investment volume was right about a little bit more than 300 million euros, so it was quite a significant investment. A lot of the money of the developer was caught up in that as well, so everybody had skin in the game. And these are some of the results that I'm not afraid to show either. So for those people that come out there and tell you that this type of property costs more money, it takes too much time, they're not telling you the truth. They're not telling you the entire story. What I can show you is that we actually were 1.4% under budget, and that budget was driven by what the market would dictate. We were not trying to throw money at an issue to try and prove that it could be done. We were trying to do it in a way that the regular market could be doing it, so as to inspire other developers to follow suit and to hopefully start to have a conversation about that this was a viable and profitable way to build buildings. Our people were happy. Over 95% of the people consistently report that they're satisfied, happy, and engaged in the buildings here. One of the clients, Bosch Siemens, that we'll see today, actually internal email dropped 25% because we purposefully built places for them to talk with each other and not just hide behind their computer and fire off emails throughout the organization. The return on investment was 13.36%. We had promised the people giving us the money that they could expect around 10, so that was even a higher return on investment. And the rents consistently outperform the rents in the market, which is always great for those investors that are buying these buildings. That's what they like to see. So when we wanted to start getting going, we said, where do we start? Where do we focus? And we picked up 5 key areas, 4 that you'll see right here, a 5th that we'll talk about later. We talked about energy, water, biodiversity, and materials. We figured that was the very concrete place that we could begin. And then the 5th, of course, is the people. But people were so dynamic and they were different from every organization that we were going to build for. We said that that's a bit more of an ad hoc situation that we'll take together with all of our clients. So, and that's what you want to get with your people at the end there. So when we started getting going, one of the first things we did in master plan is we started creating these roadmaps to success. At the very top right, as you know, and those familiar with the realization of cradle-to-cradle projects, is to start by defining what the ultimate end objective wants to be, and then you start backcasting to today. And this was a great way to provide a roadmap for success, because in this way we could actually say, okay, where do we aspire to be? What's the North Star that we want the project to achieve at the end of its completion? At the same time, we still had the next step we needed to do. Okay, that's great there, and that's where we want to go, but what do we need to do today to start really making this thing happen? Now, with an area development like Park 2020, it's a little bit easier because you can start saying phase 1, phase 2, building 1, building 2. You can build, you can learn, you can apply that learning of what you've picked up into the next structure, and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at our energy strategy, and I'll unpack these piece by piece. From the very beginning, we determined that there was going to be no gas at the park. And this was very early on. This was not recently, which in the Netherlands it is very much the thing to do, is in fact required to build these new buildings without gas. But this was in about 2007 we made the decision, no gas. At no time could, pardon me, anybody buy a building and come off of the clean renewable strategy that we had set forth in the project's initiation by putting in gas. Everybody had to continue to maintain the opportunities for electricity. 100% of the cooling comes from ground source heat and cooling supplied by a central water canal. It is Holland, so we put canals in, of course. And the rest, and about 75% of the heating. Now, when you take this last 25% of the heating plus all the energy required to do things like computers, printers, you name it, security systems, that was what we really needed to bring into the park. So from the day one, we made a conscious decision to buy only clean renewable energy, so no combustion at the park, to supply all of that. With the profits that we started making off of the park, we reinvested back into a logistics center that we were building down the road to just blanket all of those beautiful logistics rooftops with solar panels, and those were then sending the energy back over to the park, and we created a system that is now completely powered on clean renewable energy. Our central, and I'm going to tell you not just kind of what are the cool stuffs, but I'm going to, as a developer, I'm going to throw some numbers at you because I believe that it's also about how do you make the business case to do this. So I'll show you, this is how we ended up getting this business case. One of the things about our heating and cooling system is it's centralized. We built one big hot and cold storage system, not one for each individual building. And this ended up saving 3% of the space of each building that we constructed, not because we didn't need large technical rooms. And that doesn't mean that the buildings were 3% smaller. That means that 3% of the space we actually leased was bigger in the total program of the building. We call that the gross to net. So that delivered a value of 3%. The average rent per square meter, let's say, was $210. I take a conservative cap rate, which is how we value property, at 7%. That installation cost us 5.6 million euros. Imagine going to a company with cash and saying, we're going to invest 5.6 million euros in a centralized energy system before we even have one building to close onto it. They thought we were crazy. So, but then we showed them this. We said, okay, look, what is the value of the 3% that we anticipate that we're going to save? That's 2,760 square meters at 7% at 210 euros a square meter. That was a savings of 8.28 million euros. Of course, that's not the real amount because we have to cancel out the investment. I then discount that over a period of 11 years, which was the anticipated construction time. And that decision to make that would have netted that investment property a profit of just under 2 million euros. Voila, it's built and it exists. In terms of our energy systems as well, too, we always looked for not only a centralized system in the park, but also solar renewable power integrated into the buildings. We doubled the sun shading systems that were in the atriums with building integrated photovoltaics, or BIPV, that you'll see in the sunroofs there. So each building had its own renewable strategy to combine with the park. That's where we started saying things like the site and the structures need to interact with each other. For our watering, I have to say this one's a little bit harder. In the Netherlands, water is extremely cheap. We simply have too much of it, and we need to control it and get it away. This was primarily the case in the area where this was built, which was a reclaimed lake, meaning that the water table was so high. So with water, it was much more about as long as we could break even, we figured that it was the right thing to do. So this is not a big money maker, but it's not something we lost money on either. This is a completely closed-loop system. All the buildings are then closing onto a central heliophyte filtration system that cleans the gray water. That gray water is then stored in the canal, which goes back into the buildings to flush toilets or goes into the park for irrigation. And at the end of the construction, there is room for a black water anaerobic digestion system. Once that comes into place, then we can have a completely closed-loop system for not only black water, but also gray water. And one of my favorites is actually the master plan. This master plan that was constructed won the award for the American Association of Landscape Architects. I don't say that to brag. I say that because after we won the award, we actually crumpled the thing up and threw it in the trash and didn't use it, because we actually became aware and in contact with an organization in the Netherlands called the Vlinderstichting, and that means the Butterfly Association. Even our butterflies are able to lobby The Hague for their own rights. And the Vlinderstichting told us that there were 3 critically endangered species of butterfly local to the Haarlemmermeer. And we thought that that was not a great situation. In fact, it was a travesty. So we re-envisioned the entire landscaping package to be milkweeds, food sources and breeding grounds for these critically endangered species of butterfly. Cost us no more money. It was just, I will have that plant instead of that plant. And what we now have was a purpose-driven story that was a gift to the community for these local butterflies. And what's really neat, too, is that you see kids come to study them. And I use the word study very liberally. It's mostly a coloring book, and they're coloring them with blue and things like that. But it's great to be there working at a park in your suit and tie and having these kids run around. It's quite inspirational. So here you see them going out. These are some of the milkweeds, and they're planted all over. Each little pocket park has its own type of groupings of flora in order to attract a different type of species. And the undeveloped plots, we actually, instead of it being a big mud pit, we wanted to instead have a farm. So we engaged with a local social farming community. They grow all of the food, pesticide, herbicide free, that's served at the park. We produce way more on this park than we could consume on it. So we struck a deal with the local municipality that all the leftover food would go to a food bank in town. The only deal point that we demanded in the deal was that it had to be picked up in a 100% clean, renewable car, so that there would be no emissions as the food would get from the site to the people that needed it. Materials were quite important. This is the largest collection of cradle-to-cradle certified materials of any project in the world. We're very proud. We were very proud of that. I can tell you it's not as easy as it sounds in a few words. It's quite a challenge to get that done, especially in 2007 and 2008 when not many of these projects were available. And our way of doing that, whoop, we had a little bit of a situation, but our way to do that was really about inventory, screen, assess, and optimize that we know about. So we really kind of started doubling what Cradle to Cradle teaches us on how to look for its products. We said that's how we're going to look for our products in the park as well. And of course, we don't have enough products out there to create an entire structure of Class A real estate. So what we did was we took on different organizations, Eco-Intelligent Growth being one. At times we did this with other certification agencies, and we had them at least give us insight according to the Cradle to Cradle principles over, is this going to be healthy and safe? Let's make sure we're not putting any toxic chemicals in front of our inhabitants and creating a liability. We started in the early design saying where Cradle to Cradle certified materials could fit. We wanted to know where the problem areas were so that we could inform our general contractors not to take particle board with potential formaldehyde in it, for example. And the net result were beautiful buildings. And these are great structures. It's an open park. I suggest if you're ever in the Netherlands by Schipol Airport and you have 45 minutes to kill between your flight, pop over. It's about 5 minutes away and have a look. So with the human beings, this is really the critical element. Actually, it's one of the things where, till now, I've been talking about bricks and mortar and structure, but really this is where it all comes down. This is where the rubber meets the road. It has to meet the stress test of the people there. And we're purposely from day one really looking at how can we enhance their quality of experience and quality of life all in the buildings. What you're seeing is that these buildings have been, this was actually a case adopted by the World Green Building Council for the Plantronics building. And you can see some of the gains that we had there. They were quite measurable gains from what the employees self-reported. And it also has a financial benefit as well. The enhanced productivity generated a net revenue anticipated of 2.1 million euros per year simply by occupying that building, which is actually more than their rent per year. So I think that's a pretty good investment decision for them. So wrapping up now, we're going to talk a little bit about what is it to build these types of buildings, because that's one of the more challenging things. So in respect to how do you get it done, again, I'm going to give you one more case. Is we had to create some extra room in the beginning. We had to invest money in training our staff, training all the general contractors, training, and basically learning ourselves how to do this too. We came from a very classical real estate development practice. So we had to unlearn the things that we were doing incorrectly and then relearn what it was to be effective. And once we were then effective, then we would work on how could we build these things as efficiently as possible. Interestingly enough, we actually dropped construction costs by 18% in that second part of seeking efficiencies when we knew what it was to be effective. And all the same while not only did not compromise quality, but increased quality to higher levels throughout the park. So this is Bosch Siemens. They first came to us with a request for proposal. They said we need 10,000 square meters. And we did a study with them, and we understood that including their future growth, we could actually house them on 7,500 square meters. Now, the objective is not to sell square meters. This is where most development gets it wrong. The objective is to sell the square meters that matter, make them as great as they could possibly be, and try and charge a premium for it. That's the way to go. So what we ended up doing here was we said, no, we're not going to build 10,000 square meters for you. We can build you much less, and we can save you a lot of money. So how much money were we going to save them? We were going to save them about $500,000 a year, $1,500. Take that over the 10-year lease agreement, which they closed, discount it back by 5%. It was a total of about $3 million in change that we were going to save this organization. We said, how about you take 50% of that, stick it in your pocket, bring it back to Munich, and give it to the board of directors. I promise they're going to be happy with you, give you a pat on the back and tell you you're doing a great job in the Netherlands. Take the other 50% and then reinvest it back into the 7,500, and that's how we're actually going to find the free cash flow to invest in some higher quality buildings. Net result was that they paid a little bit higher of a lease price than the market lease, but they were still paying less than they were willing to, than they came to us originally to pay. And the great thing is investors don't buy square meters, they buy cash flow. So whenever you're paying more rent per square meter, the investors jumped at this. And it was right in the heart of the crisis. During the crisis, this was one of the only projects that was still building on a consistent basis. So that's how we found the ability to do some of the early day training and things we wanted to do. we started really looking at these buildings very consequently on the building like a tree premise. We started ensuring that not only were we going to design them for disassembly, all our steel constructions, but that we were documenting what the material potential was, what the nutrient potential was. Is it a biological nutrient? Is it a technical nutrient? Starting to try and define the pathways. I promise you we got probably a lot of it wrong. We got better the more that we did, but at least the first thing is to just get going, to just start. And if you make the wrong decision, you will find that out very quickly, and then you can start making the right decision sooner than you did before. And so here the buildings are all designed for disassembly. We built them as much as we could in prefabricated fashion in factories, brought them to the site, put them up. It actually helped us speed up construction time, which also saves you a lot of money on site when the money is the most expensive. And last but not least, we actually always built the buildings to do this. It was a value cascade, so the highest value of real estate at that point would have been commercial real estate or offices. It also has the heaviest loads because you have the highest density of people in your buildings concentrated on the floors, which means that if you build office buildings, no matter what, we could know that we would not have to do any structural improvements to repurpose them into housing, to schools, to houses of worship, so on and so forth. So these things can easily be redesigned. You have floor plates that are prefab that you can just pull out to make staircases. If the housing market falls apart, then we can repurpose these into housing. If the office market falls apart, we can repurpose them into housing or some other function. At the very end, if we need to start taking apart components, we can take a look at giving off the entire solar system or structural beams. At the very last component, we were looking at what is the material potential, steel, copper, concrete, these types of things. And what we definitely do not want is to just demolish the thing. So that's why all the buildings were designed to be disassembled. So the interior things, there's sort of 6 areas in development that you can really have an impact on people. I don't have time to go through all of them, but with the same amount of rigor, I'm only going to pick one, and that's air quality. We do know that air quality has an immense effect on people's cognitive functions. This is a study conducted by Harvard University in Syracuse. I suggest you check it out and download it. It's a very, very well done study talking about these different strategy, information usage, seeking information, crisis response, focused learning, applied activity learning, all pretty important things in the office. So these were ways that you could actually see that 101% of your cognitive function increases when you're looking at both VOCs and CO2, and 61% when you're doing VOCs only. We studied then all of the air quality in terms of VOCs. CO2 we could measure quite easily. VOCs was harder. So we brought in specialists to measure the VOC, figured out exactly what was in the air. Then we started looking at what types of volatile organic compounds could be sequestered better by specific plants, and then very purposefully just started putting those plants in the office. What you'll end up actually seeing is that the net result with plants, our average or our max VOC levels were lower than the average of the offices without the plants. So you can really see that they do have a drastic effect on your air quality. So thank you. I believe I'm a little over time, but I hope it was okay.
You're definitely not over time. You started late, so you actually had a couple of minutes. And can I just say, you just blew my mind. I mean, I was already like a child in the candy store when I went to the C2C lab, and I was like, oh my God, all the possibilities. And now you just built this entire park that does that kind of thing. How did you actually get into it? I mean, all the construction people I talk to are like, what? No, oh God, it gets complicated. How did you even have the idea to start such a big project?
So I did not. My cousin did, who owned Delta Development Group. I have to say how I personally got involved with it is I was looking for a job, and nobody was doing sustainability. I had come just out of a master's degree, and he said, we're going to do this park, and we're having tough time finding materials. And I thought, what kind of crazy question is this? How hard is it to find construction materials? And so I showed up in very formally to my cousin's office. I said, well, okay, what's the density? What's the cap rate that we're looking to say? The square meters, da, da, da. And he just went, time out. And he slid across the table, cradle to cradle, remaking the way we make things. And he said, I want you to read this book, and I want you to come back to me and tell me what you think. It was the greatest soft sell I've ever received in my entire life. And I was hooked when I was reading, and the guy's sitting on his chair, and the kids are playing on the carpet right on the first couple pages. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I went back to Kurt, and I said, is this possible? And he said, well, I don't know, but I convinced someone to give me 300 million euros, and we're going to figure it out. And that's how we got going. And what was really nice is that, you know, when we had the buy-in from the municipality, they approved the master plan like it was nothing. It breezed through legislation. 100% approvals from both sides, the right side that wanted to have jobs and economics, and the left side that was looking at social considerations and, you know, protecting the environment. We hit all of the key points that both sides of those municipal figures wanted, and it's always helpful to have Michael and Bill in the audience too, to work their magic and do the things and to help convince them. So it was really just this thing that came together very quickly, and you know, we knew we were on to something. We didn't know that it was going to be as good as it was going to be.
I really want to see it up close. Do any of you have a question? Hat irgendwer eine Frage an Owen?
I've got my ear thing here, so ask away in German.
Or I can translate as well. Gibt's eine Frage? Ich bin immer so schlecht im Sehen. Da hinten, gell? Ah, da. Yes, it's being passed on. It's kind of like a Staffellauf, we say in German, you know, where they pass the...
Hi. Could you tell us a little more about how did you raise the money? I mean, the raise of capital. I mean, in what mode, and whether it has any special discount from the market rate and others?
No, that's a great one, because there are discounts. The discounts didn't come actually from the money. So for the $300,000, we partnered up with Volker Wessels, which was the second largest construction company in the Netherlands. We wanted the construction company to also have skin in the game, which we also heard from Jeff yesterday in what he was talking about with CNA. So they put up 25% of the cash. We put up 25% of the cash as a Delta Development Group, and a private equity company put up the last 50%. So this was at a time where it really was in the heart of the crisis. Financing was extremely difficult to come by, so private equity was really the best way to do that now. What you see actually for these types of products in this day and age, it's really, we've heard that it's extremely easy to fill funds. So funds are really looking for capital. There's hungry, purpose-driven and impact investments out there to fill these funds for enormous amounts, but they have a limited supply of deals that they can do. So building funds right now in terms of generating capital to these types of projects would be a way I would investigate today, not just the private equity market. So the municipality was giving us breaks, actually, and that was great. That was part of the negotiations that we ran with them, was that they gave us a 20 or a 5% land discount on the land if we had BREEAM good, and they gave us a 15% discount if we had BREEAM excellent. And the great thing was we were sitting in the advisory committee of the Dutch Green Building Council for how to create the standard of new build and renovations. So what we started doing was really pushing a lot of cradle to cradle in there as well too. So we were trying to get, especially in the material side on MAP 5, and a lot of cradle to cradle in there too. So we would be able to get 15% discounts on the land, which was really necessary. But also, because we were doing this type of project, the municipality said we wouldn't have to pay them for the land until we actually sold the building. So that built a buffer in the cash flows up front that we could reinvest back into the building, and then we would pay them back with a bit of a premium once we sold the building and the land to an investor.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
Ja. Weiter. Hier drüben, hier unten.
And what was the timeline for realizing this project? And a specific question: what kind of plans did you have for the inner, for having a better climate inside?
My goodness, you're gonna really hit my ignorance of plants here with this one. What I can tell you is that they're in the presentation. The red ones. No, you're really looking actually for what we call in Dutch vetteplanten. So things that really need low levels of daylight, but that also emit higher levels of oxygen and sequester more carbon. That's what we were told. The studies we found online and through advisors, basically we bought in all of our biophilic plant solutions. And then we relied on our advisors there. And it also has, I have to say, it sounds very noble just to say it's all about the plants, but there's also maintenance components as well too. So we really needed to balance which ones had a better advantage for maintenance as well too. And the question on timeline, the timeline was ambitious. It was started in about 2007, 2008, right before the financial crisis hit. So that timeline took a bit of a tumble a few years later. Originally, we had looked at about 11, 12 years, and now we are, the Delta Development Group is just about to wrap up the last piece of the last plots. So right now, it's still ongoing. If you want to see how they're, great for you, if you want to see how they build it behind the scenes, then you can go up there and see what the core and shell looks like.
And last question, I think we had one over here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Congratulations. And first question, what's your next topic we're aiming for now? And second question is, how many of your competitors or other investors are saying, wow, great, we copy it and we go on doing things like that?
So I'm going to answer that in a little bit of a roundabout way because I do not work for the Delta Development Group anymore. So my next objective is I work for an organization called JLL, and I think that is a wonderful opportunity to start bringing this deep into JLL. To give you a bit of reference on size, as we have now about 96,000 people that work for the company. It's the second largest real estate services organization in the world. We manage right now about between 465 million and 470 million square meters of property across the globe. Every day, about 50 million people enter a JLL building, and we handle about $1.2 billion worth of real estate transactions every single day. So if you want to talk about how do you take an idea like this and you scale it, that's the place to be. So our objective right now, at least my personal objective right now, is to really work together with JLL, and I'm blown away on a daily basis about the amount of people and the skills and the talent that's in that organization. I think there's a really wonderful opportunity. Our CEO, Christian Olbricht, is dedicated to really looking for how to make a sustainable impact through the business. So we are provided a lot of place to explore and to see what we can do there. We are, this last year in 2019, we've been working primarily in hitting our design and build teams to start bringing our interior designers and construction companies into this manner of thinking, engaging in a lot of training. I train them for free. People used to have to pay for that, so that's nice for them. And for us, we've been focusing also on valuation. So we value property as JLL. So that's a critical one because now we're starting to expand the scope of valuations to start not only looking at traditional classic forms of this is what a building is worth, but looking at those things like residual value of materials, of health and well-being, and seeing what that impacts. I think that that's a watershed moment. I bet you it's going to be a little bit of a time before that really starts to be embraced by the industry on a regular and consistent basis. But we're starting. And again, just start and get going. So that's, I would say, the next things where I'm trying to go, or where JLL's trying to go.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
And good luck in getting it large scale into that company and, going sustainable and hopefully a lot of cradle to cradle.
They're doing well already, so
Perfect.
We're only going to help them more.
Perfect. Thank you.